The road was empty when Francis stopped walking. He had been moving since before dawn, sandals worn thin against the stone, cloak heavy with dust. The village behind him was quiet now. Too quiet for the hour. Something in him had tightened without warning. Not fear. Not exhaustion. Recognition. Francis stood still. He had learned, over time, to trust this feeling. It came rarely, but never without reason. It was the sensation of being interrupted, not by noise, but by truth. He closed his eyes. "Lord," he said, softly, "if you are asking something of me, speak." The wind moved through the olive trees. Leaves whispered, then settled. Silence followed. Francis waited. Minutes passed. Then more. Nothing came. He opened his eyes again, uncertain. He had expected correction, guidance, instruction. Instead, there was only the road stretching forward, familiar, safe, already decided. Francis exhaled. Perhaps, he murmured, this was only fatigue. He took one step forward. And then the weight returned. Not heavy. Precise. It settled behind his eyes, as if something unseen had drawn near and stopped him gently by the shoulders. "Francis." He froze. "Yes," he answered immediately. "You asked me to speak," the voice said. "I did." Francis's heart quickened. "Forgive me. I thought." "You thought what you intended to do," the voice interrupted. "Was the same as what you were asked." Francis lowered his head. "I do not understand." "Then I will show you." The road dissolved. Francis found himself standing in a wide field beneath a pale sky. Around him were many people, each holding something in their hands, tools, scrolls, loaves of bread, garments folded with care. They looked earnest. Focused. Ready. "What is this place?" Francis asked. "A gathering of those who meant well," the voice replied. Francis watched as one man stepped forward. "I was ready," the man said quickly. "I prepared everything. I only delayed because I wanted to do it properly." He gestured to the tools in his hands. Another spoke. "I intended to obey," she said. "I only waited until I felt certain." Others followed. "I was waiting for peace. I needed confirmation. I didn't want to make a mistake." Francis felt a quiet unease grow in his chest. "They sound sincere," he said. "They are," the voice replied. "But sincerity is not obedience." Francis turned sharply. "Then what is missing?" The field changed. A narrow path appeared between the people. It was unremarkable, no light, no sign, no certainty attached to it. Just a direction. This, the voice said, was the instruction. Francis watched as the people hesitated. Some looked down at what they carried. Others looked at the path, then back at their preparations. One man stepped toward it, then stopped. "I will go," he said, "once I am fully ready." He stepped back. Another shook her head. "I would go," she said softly, "if I knew where it led." No one moved. Francis felt his throat tighten. "They were willing," he protested. "They were willing to intend," the voice said. "They were not willing to obey without control." Francis fell to his knees. "So much good," he whispered. "So much effort." "Yes," the voice replied. "And all of it placed before obedience, instead of after it." The field began to fade. But Lord, Francis said urgently, surely you understand hesitation. Fear. The desire to do things well. The voice answered with quiet clarity. I do. Then why does it matter? Francis asked. The silence deepened. Because delayed obedience, the voice said, is obedience that never arrives. Francis felt the truth settle like stone. The vision ended. He was back on the road, knees against the dust, breath unsteady. The path ahead looked the same. But he was no longer. From that day on, Francis changed how he listened. When he felt the first pull, he moved. When the instruction was simple, he did not complicate it. When obedience cost clarity, he paid it willingly. And when others asked him how to know God's will, he answered with words that unsettled many. Do not wait to feel ready. Readiness is often the excuse that keeps obedience safely delayed. But Francis knew. There was still more to be shown. Another night would come. A night when he would learn what happens when obedience is finally offered, after the moment has already passed. The next night came with rain. Not a storm, just a steady, patient fall that darkened the earth and softened every sound. Francis sat beneath the overhang of the chapel roof, listening to the droplets strike stone and disappear. He had not sought another vision. But he had learned by now that truth does not wait to be summoned. Francis. The voice came quietly, almost blended with the rain. Yes, he answered. You have seen those who delay obedience, the voice said. Tonight, you will see what becomes of obedience when it arrives too late. Francis closed his eyes. The world shifted. He stood at the edge of a narrow crossing, a bridge of worn stone arching over a deep ravine. On the far side stood a small village, lights glowing faintly, smoke rising from chimneys. It looked ordinary. Peaceful. Between the bridge and Francis stood a group of people. They were moving now. Eagerly. What is this place? Francis asked. A moment that does not repeat, the voice replied. Francis watched as the people approached the bridge with urgency. Some ran. Some clutched their belongings tightly. Others spoke aloud as they moved. I'm ready now, one man said. I understand what was asked. I shouldn't have waited, another cried. But I've come as fast as I could. They reached the bridge. And stopped. The bridge was still there. But it no longer bore weight. This is not punishment, he whispered. No, the voice said. This is timing. The vision faded. Francis was back beneath the overhang, rain soaking into his sleeves, heart heavy with understanding. From that night on, Francis changed how he spoke about obedience. He no longer said, God understands your hesitation. He said instead, God understands it so well that he does not confuse it with obedience. When people told him they intended to act, he listened patiently. Then he asked one question. When? Some were offended. Others unsettled. But a few, only a few, recognized the danger in waiting for a better moment. Francis knew. One final night remained. A night when he would learn how to live with the weight of having obeyed. And the grief of knowing how many never would. The final night did not bring a vision. Francis woke before dawn, the rain long gone, the world washed clean and quiet. The air felt lighter than it had in days, yet his chest carried a weight he had never known before. Not fear. Grief. He rose slowly and stepped outside the monastery walls. The path before him was familiar now, etched by years of walking, preaching, obeying. Birds stirred in the olive trees. The sky held that pale, fragile light that comes just before morning fully arrives. He stopped. Not because he was instructed. Because he understood. For the first time, Francis felt the cost of obedience that others never gave. It was not pride. It was not relief. It was the sorrow of knowing how many chances quietly pass without resistance. He knelt on the damp earth. "Lord," he said at last, his voice steady but low, "why show me this?" There was no thunder. No radiance. Only stillness. And then the voice came, not heavy, not urgent, but deeply honest. "Because obedience does not end when you act," it said. "It begins when you live with what others chose not to do." Francis closed his eyes. "I cannot carry them," he whispered. "I cannot obey for them." Cracks traced its surface, thin at first, then spreading. Stones shifted subtly, dangerously. Francis felt his chest tighten. "They didn't refuse," he said. "They came." "Yes," the voice replied. "But they came after the moment that required them." A woman stepped onto the bridge carefully. It held, for one step. Then another. She froze. The bridge groaned beneath her. Fear overtook her face. "I'm obeying now," she pleaded. "Doesn't that count?" The bridge did not answer. Francis watched helplessly as she stepped back, shaken, returning to the edge. Others tried. Each attempt ended the same: hesitation, fear, retreat. "They're trying," Francis said desperately. "They are trying to cross," the voice said. "Not to obey." Francis fell to his knees. "What is the difference?" he asked. The rain seemed to pause. "Obedience responds to instruction," the voice said. "Trying responds to consequence." Francis felt the words cut deeply. The people gathered at the edge now, looking at the village across the ravine. "So close," one whispered. "Yes," the voice replied. "And no longer reachable." Francis noticed something then. On the far side of the ravine, the village lights were dimming. Not vanishing, just growing fewer, farther apart. "The opportunity is passing," he said. "It already has," the voice answered. One man stood apart from the others. He was not speaking. Not pleading. He simply stared at the bridge. Then, slowly, he turned away. Francis watched him walk, not toward the village, but back into the darkness behind them. "Where is he going?" Francis asked. "To where obedience was no longer required," the voice said. "He has mistaken peace for permission." The bridge cracked again. A final sound, sharp, unmistakable. The crossing collapsed inward, stones sinking into the ravine, leaving nothing but open space between where they stood and where they had meant to go. No one screamed. They simply stared. Francis could barely breathe. "No," the voice replied. "But you can obey in front of them." Francis felt the truth settle gently, like a final piece placed where it had always belonged. "You are not responsible for their delay," the voice continued. "But you are responsible for your response." The light grew brighter around him, not from heaven, but from the rising sun. Francis understood then. Obedience was not meant to save him from sorrow. It was meant to keep him from regret. He stood. When the brothers asked him later how to know when God was calling, Francis did not speak of voices or visions. He said only this: "The call rarely feels urgent. That is why it must be answered quickly. And if you wait until you feel ready," he added softly, "you may discover the moment that required you has already passed." In the years that followed, many listened. Some delayed. Some never returned. Francis walked on, obedient, watchful, gentle, and marked by a quiet grief he never tried to hide. And when he died, they said his final hours were peaceful. Not because he had done everything right, but because he had not waited. When the path first opened before him, the road had asked. And he had stepped onto it. While it was still there. The warning St. Francis carried was never loud. It did not chase. It did not beg. It did not wait forever. Obedience rarely announces itself with urgency. It usually arrives quietly, early, while delay still feels harmless. And the most dangerous words are not no, but later. If something stirred while you listened. If a moment came to mind you've been postponing. Do not rush past that. The path does not stay open because you meant well. It stays open only while you are willing to step onto it. And sometimes, the holiest thing you can do is move before the moment passes in silence.